God was always in the background. I had a desire to be a pastor from when I was a young child, but my parents didn't go to church. I think it came from the fact that I always loved about talking about God. And my conception of God was probably a little bit different because my conception of God was not formulated by what I learned in church because my parents didn't go to church. So mine was kind of what I picked up from things around me. And I grew up in a pretty intellectual environment. So reading was fundamental for what we did. And one of the things that my father felt was required reading was the Bible. So it had everything. It had history and poetry and ethics and values. I had a deep, deep desire to learn more about God. So from a Methodist perspective, when we look at something called prevenient grace, that God is claimed us as his own and works in our life before we even have an understanding of it, I know exactly what that is because I had that so abundantly in my life as a child. So I worked in Washington, D.C. as a legislative aide in the early 80s, and then did constituent work back in Evanston, Illinois, which is due north of Chicago, and where I went to school at Northwestern. And then met Dave, my late husband, and he was in Chicago. He was done with his Navy career, and we got married and started a family. When we moved down here, that was the end stage of Dave's life and his cancer, and that was when we first moved down here. And this church really wrapped their arms around me. And so I've been able to understand what the DNA of this church is in a very real way and see how God can use that mightily in the world. The reason why I am a hopeful person is because of the work of Jesus Christ in the world and in myself. It's interesting to find a lot of times when you're talking with people, fellow clergy people, a lot of us come from backgrounds where we did have difficulty. I love learning about leadership, and studying leaders and reading biographies and all sorts of things and see what makes these leaders tick. And you know what usually happens? Usually they've had tragedy in their life. Usually they've had difficulties or obstacles that they've had to overcome. And it doesn't defeat them because they don't let it, because they try and look for what they can learn from it. And I think from our standpoint as people of faith and Christians is, what can we learn from the difficulties we have in life that we can help someone else get through those difficulties in life? And not because of what we say, but because who God is. And that's an incredible gift that God gives us each and every day.